culture, how to create an uncompromising employee experience virtually anywhere. I'm super excited to welcome Cherie Healey today to our sessions. She's awesome. She works with leaders to help them solve the world's biggest problems. She focuses on well-being, connection, and self-awareness, and creating those connections that we need to succeed. Cherie is the resident well-being coach at YouTube and has worked with women at Google for over 10 years, advising corporate leaders for 25. And she's a women in management facilitator at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. And I was doing some of that stuff last week or the week before.
Yeah. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, good, awesome. Well, welcome today. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate you being here today and joining our clan of culture designers. So I want to talk with you. We're going to chat about well-being, etc. today. But when you and I spoke, we were talking a little bit about how organizations can bring out the best in their folks. And now we're in the situation of COVID. Tell me a little bit about, has that changed? What's different? What's happening right now?
I mean, here's what I want to say. First off, thank you for having me. I was so excited. Like, what a great way to start a week with all kinds of like-minded souls who are trying to make our work better for all. So I'm so grateful to have this conversation with all of you. And I feel like we need hours because I feel like we could just rant on this topic all the days. I have a lot to say about it. But when you and I talked, we noted, how much COVID has taught us and how important it is that we really get back to the drawing board and look at the reality that we're facing right now. Our people are not well. No one's really working with a full deck right now. And I think it is long overdue. It's not that we're just having this conversation because of 2020. We should have really pivoted, in fact, not even pivoted, fully redesigned the whole work paradigm in my mind many years ago. And I will tell you just like this sort of backdrop story that I bet we can all relate to. I don't know if any of you have kids, but you can imagine when you were a kid, what it was like looking at your parents and looking at your future and knowing what life might be like when you were out there in the work world once college was over, once school was over. And my son he's now 16, but a few years ago at 14, he said to me, well, it started with me asking him a question. Why do you play the video game so much, babe? You got to get off the video games, let's get serious. You got to have good grades and you've got to get, prepared for college and all of this that we do to our children. And he came back with a comment that I will never forget that sort of leveled the whole situation. I think for me, for us as adults, he said, Mom, here's how I see it. I see that high school is getting really stressful. I can see it's going to get more and more intense as I get closer to graduation. And then I'm going to get to college. And that's going to be really stressful because I'm going to have to figure out what I want to major in. And then I'm going to have to figure out what I want to do with my life. And then I see you and Dad, you're stressed a lot. You're working really hard. And I figure this is my last minute to play.
Oh, wow.
And I was like,
wow.
Oh, good Lord. Is that true?
Yeah.
Is that like, why do we all have these Sunday scaries and the Monday blues? And what the heck, we spend 90,000 hours at our jobs, 90,000 hours. And what our jobs are competition. They're full of fear. They're maybe like us doing a whole lot of things that aren't meaningful for us, for somebody else's bottom line. And at some point in my career, when I was doing the whole internet startup culture development, like how do we take advantage of this new moment, and create these beautiful places to work? And I think it hit me, we sitting in a board meeting one day and everybody was talking about bottom line. And I was like, wait a minute, is the bottom line, are we only here, just all of us, to make money? There's a bigger bottom line. Like, what gets us out of bed every day? Why are we here on this planet anyway? And if we're going to spend 90,000 hours doing something, it should be rad. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So my sense is now 2020 came and it was hard and it was still hard, but it's a moment of awakening. I feel like it's a moment where we can go, okay, wait, we've been doing the same thing kind of since the industrial era, treating ourselves like machines, you know, working ourselves, grinding. I mean, I'm here in Silicon Valley in sort of the center of this grind. And I work with so many leaders who are suffering work-life balance and trying not to burn out and then going on disability leave and only coming back for more because it's so competitive. And there's so many people that want to work down here that it's not an elevated concern in the way that I think it should be, and people are not doing well. And I just figured now we know that there are more global problems that are right up for review. Maybe some things were very much under the rug. It's not like they weren't there before, but now we're very much seeing what needs to be solved. And we've got all this workforce, all these great humans who are stressed and in fear and tired and burned out and worried and not well. And how are they supposed to solve for these big problems when they're in the amygdala and they're just afraid and stressed? We are not our most brilliant selves there. So I think our conversation that you and I had, and what I could talk about for days, is really how do we create the conditions for nervous systems that are settled, for safety, for well-being, for ultimately love and freedom. That's what human beings are here for. And God forbid we use the L word at work, But how do we create the conditions for each one of us to feel like we can be in our prefrontal cortex and we can be in our hearts and we can be ultimately the most innovative, creative human beings we're here to be?
Well, tell me, so I'm going to ask you to dig into that for sure. I want to ask you a little bit about why is it important that organizations pay attention to this? Why is it important that we help people stay in our prefrontal cortex? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, because, forever we've talked about high performance and employee optimization, and, it's all about machine-like performance, and more, better, faster. And that it maybe worked when we were on the assembly lines. It didn't work so well when we got into the information era, and that was really still more, better, faster. How do we churn all this data? How do we use our people to the nth degree? And so I studied with all these high performance experts back in the 90s and the early 2000s, like as an athlete, I was like, how can we do more? How can we be our best selves? And so that question now has evolved into, we're in the imagination era. We're in a completely different era that we have not stopped to recognize. It's like our school systems haven't been updated since hundreds of years, since the beginning of time. We're still educating in the same way, but the world has changed. And so if we're in this imagination era moment, and we know we've got these really critical problems to solve, we need to be able to tap into people's right brain in a way that we haven't before. The left brain was the holy place back in the day. It was like, the analytical, the proven, the data-driven. But now we need to get into deeply human skills, nothing that can be outsourced, nothing that can be automated, nothing that you can put a computer on. A computer can't innovate in ways that we need humans to be able to right now, to think way out of the box. And so, a great read, if anybody has not read this, is Daniel Pink's Whole New Mind, because he talks about these 6 skills that we need for the future. And if you're to tap into that in human beings, new conditions are required,
Well, and I'm thinking now, I keep hearing from a whole bunch of influencers within kind of this workspace talking about AI is going to take over and we have to prepare for AI. And that, for me, that just creates a whole bunch more stress for people because of exactly what you said about this need. Let's treat people more like machines rather than this. And so AI, people have a worry about that, right? It's the more, better, faster kind of idea. It's a little scary, right?
Yeah. There's so much to be said for actually this new way of working that I talk to my clients about that is actually inclusive of slowing down. That what comes when we stop, what comes when we slow and listen to the intuition, to the inner guidance, to the knowing, to be able to actually program and design time in your day for white space, to look out a window, to go into nature, to think. I mean, this is nothing new. This is ancient, and yet we've forgotten. I used to, way back in the day, work with an organization called Play, and they were an agency that would come in and infuse this in organizations, because we're so heads down and just so checking off the to-do list that we don't get the spaciousness to actually tune into higher levels of thinking. This is flow state, and flow state's been studied forever, but if you are slow and listening within and not doing something on the computer, it looks like you're not doing anything. We're so stuck in this productivity model that we can't possibly imagine another way.
Yeah.
But it's everything. Like, the greatest ideas come when you're riding a bike, or when you're doing something other than being like the founder of Patagonia, the leader. He'll come around and be like, why is everybody on their computers? It's a gorgeous day out. Go outside and surf. You'll come up with much better thinking. You'll bring us greater results.
Yeah.
And I think too, there's data to prove this. The Institute for Research on Happiness in Copenhagen found that the number one indicator of job satisfaction is deep and meaningful relationships. And so we can't deny that that's a very human need. That if you have one best friend at work, you'll do 7 times better than all of your peers. They've measured the results and the type of contribution, not just, on the productivity scale, but I think on the way that person affects the rest of the people that they work with, probably the way they communicate, all of it.
Yeah. Which is, there's so much to unpack in what you just said, from that listening and creating the space. I know next week we're actually doing a flow session. So just a plug, that's a workshop next week that we have. But this idea of really kind of tapping into what does that look like? So tell me a little bit about your experience, and how do we create these conditions within our workspace for people to really embrace kind of this other side of themselves?
Yeah, that's, you touched on it when we were introing around, like, the areas that I focus on that I think are just such a great thing to just take away from this conference and think about how you would start to invest in these areas. It's my thinking is that the greatest companies at this moment in time, the ones who will truly succeed, are the ones who are going to make it their commitment to help their people become the people they're here to be. To align deeply with each person's reason for being on the planet. We bring people in and we tell them, this is our mission, this is our vision, here are our values, but if they aren't aligned with each person's, and that doesn't mean they need to be exactly the same or shared, but they need to be aligned, intertwined, that it's meaningful, and that there's a mutual, I think this employer-employee relationship needs to be redesigned. It's, why are we here? I'm not here to use you and all of your talent. You're my talent, and I'm going to use you for my gain. I'm here to equally invest in you becoming the person you're here to become in your lifetime. We jump around from job to job, and so there isn't this, like, deep commitment to each other anymore that maybe there was a long time ago, where you'd stay at one company for your life,
Yeah.
retirement and all of that. But if even there could just be this, we're going to be together for a year. How can I, as your company, as the place where you give me the best of you, support your growth and your becoming you, And the way I kind of map that is, we work on self-awareness, and well-being and connection. So how can I create the conditions for you to become more self-aware? So there's ways of working on, I think ultimately the greatest career strategy for everyone is to know your essence and to go where you'll be used for that essence. Most people don't know what that is. And they're all stuck in, like, what's my purpose, And, oh, well, I have this resume with all of these jobs and these skills. This role looks like, a little hole that I could sort of plug myself into, or a box that I might fit into. Versus, no, what is my essence? What's my gift to give in this world? And let me find a partner, a company who wants to like knock that out of the park with me, come up with a performance system that's maybe unique to me, because I also see like a lot of women that I work with,
Yeah.
they have all these invisible skills, all these things that are very hard to measure, that don't show up on the perf ratings. So
Yeah.
they get rated in like a very masculine sort of paradigm, and they feel unseen and unappreciated. So if we work together to really know that essence, which I think is at the heart of a personal brand, know someone's story, that we should be able to tell stories that are vulnerable and courageous, like go into a company and say, here's my story, this is what I know of myself, and find that welcome to, story sharing with everybody, so that we are more aware of who we are beyond our title and our resumes. So that's a little highlight of like the self-awareness work. And then well-being, really looking at, it takes something special and individual for all of us to be our best. It's not like, okay, I'm going to give you a certain amount of vacation, I'm going to give you a certain title and a salary, and that should be good, right? And I'll give you a little education fund where you can go and find some support, or maybe there's some really lovely training resources in the company, and we do some happy hours. But it's too superficial at this point. We came in and we like checked a lot of cool boxes. I think Google really set a standard for the ways that they could make the workplace really dynamic and amazing. But we need to go deeper, and we need to admit that it's different for everybody, that everybody really has a unique set of needs and conditions that would, have them be their ultimate best selves. And then with connection, and we'll unpack all these, but just to highlight, I think with connection and knowing that deep and meaningful relationships are the number one indicator of job satisfaction, then how do we create pathways to connection? There's a lot of fun ways, we see like ways that we're innovating using Zoom and breakout sessions and, all kinds of ways that we can start to bring people together. But we need to go deeper into what it is that really drives people. I created these user guides that I think we'll talk about and share with people that would have us really be able to connect in a deeper, more meaningful way. And communication is the bridge to relationship, and safety is required for that. So what are we doing to create a safe environment where we can mess up and make mistakes and talk about our feelings, like our emotions, and not get scared? So what I've been doing, being in residency at YouTube, and I'm available to do residencies at other companies too this year, is to go in and have this model of, I work with the leader of a team and the team, and we create new language and new rituals and new codes, so that a kind of a deeper level of communication and safety can be established within the larger culture. I think I also see like big cultures coming in and being like, this is our culture.
Yeah.
But then teams also have to have cultures that fit into that, and how they interact with each other is how that happens.
It's I'm like, I just need to clap, because I think it's not only about the organization doing something. And I think often what happens in organizations, and sometimes what happens with leaders and teams, is they think the organization needs to do this, versus how can we do this with ourselves. And I don't think it's a one or the other. I think it's an and, like my little and symbol behind me. It's an and world of how can organizations foster the environment, and how can teams and leaders really work to create the culture that inspires, ignites, gets people excited, creates the experience that people want to have, and connect the two together. I think is I'm super like pumped about this, because that's where it is, right? That's where that idea of how do we bring that, the well-being, the connection, the experience, for people to really bring out the best in themselves. So I'm enjoying this.
True. It's like I've done these team manifestos. We'll do a retreat and develop a team manifesto that's so supercharged. Like they write it, it comes from, first, let's dive into each one of you and know what each one of you is here for. Why were you born? And we do this deep, cool, fun work, getting to know each other and peel away all the labels and titles and roles that we play in life. And then ultimately put that together with knowing why we're here at this company. But what are we? What are we, this little family? Or maybe it's a big, family of many people, but what do we stand for within that to create like a team identity?
Yeah. Well, and I love the language, right? A manifesto, or what do we stand for? And I know that some organizations use purpose, and I had a colleague, they called it their united front. They really enjoyed kind of that idea, but this idea of that inspiring kind of piece of you're here for more than just putting in the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That,
Why don't we know our employees, our person's like spouse's name or kid's name or things that's the benefit of last year, right? We're in each other's homes now.
yeah.
So it should be a whole lot easier and less awkward, I think, to start going into that and saying, who are you? And how can I support you in all the ways, not just for your project and your goals for the month?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think this, how do you see, what have you seen happen, I think is the better question. What have you seen happen when you've been working with organizations on these things? What do you see go on in the organizations when they start to embrace this?
Well, it can be, look, we've been talking about these 3 buckets of self-awareness, connection, well-being. I'll tell you a story about when we did this with one team at Google with just well-being.
Yeah.
We're going to throw down a well-being challenge and see
Nice.
if we elevate this and really say, like, we care about you and how you're doing. And as a group, we decide to say, like, no meeting Fridays, or, we're going to not email each other after hours, or what did it really break down to is these things that we're going to do together to create
Yeah.
our well-being, and give it, we just gave it a couple months, and oh my God, it was the most amazing thing. All of a sudden, this team is outperforming, their perf ratings are going up, they're visibly happy. And there was a boss who was not involved in this. This is a client of mine that we did it kind of on the down low, because that's another thing we're seeing is that, teams within an organization can do this sometimes, but it's not coming from the top down. And so we go grassroots. We're saying we're not going to wait. It'd be great if it was top down and grassroots, but if it's not top down, let's do it for ourselves. So this gentleman who is the VP of this group saw what was happening and could see even in the measurements of like their sales were going up and all these great, measurable results were also showing up. And he pulls my client in and he goes, I'm sorry, can you PowerPoint for me what it is that you're doing? I don't understand what's going on in your group. And we were like, yes, we can PowerPoint this. Of course, it's wholeheartedly explained what we're up to, but it was fun to do it on the down low. So that was one thing to say, like, that group was changed forever. And the people on the team were saying they couldn't believe that their boss, who started this, cared as much as she did. And she actually announced it in tears. She was honestly being vulnerable and telling her team, like, it's painful for me to watch you all struggle. I'm struggling no more, and let's see. And they tested it. And I think that's a challenge we should all do, is just test it. If you think it's crazy, or if you think it won't work, or if it's going to look like it takes money and time and it's not possible, just test it and watch, because we've done it also from the top down level, taking on, a big well-being initiative at YouTube and watching the team all report in every week. We had like mandatory weekly celebrations. That was one way we activated this. And we went around and talked about what was working well and what people wanted to be seen for. And they got to shout out something that they wanted to be seen for, but also shout out somebody on the team that they wanted to recognize. So in those, they were saying, oh my God, I feel like we're in this bubble within this bigger organization where we have something that I know everybody else would love. They go into other teams and people aren't speaking as kindly to each other. They're stressful. They're motivated by fear. It's just, we created a bubble that could not have been more exciting, because I think it changed these people who are in this team's careers. and raise their standard for what it is to work together.
Yeah, that's huge. I love that. Raise the standard of what it is to work together.
Yeah.
So here's a question that I have. So let's say I'm working in a team and my team is struggling, and there's a lot of history in the team, right? Of that disconnection, or people not talking kindly to another, or feeling like people are micromanaging, or just the team is what somebody from the outside might call not as functional. They're not functioning as a team. Where do I start? And maybe it's the same if my team is doing okay, but where do I start as a leader or as a team member?
As a leader, well, it can come from both. I think that's great that you said leader or team. As a leader, there's a moment where a line gets drawn in the sand, where a leader could say, I know we've been in this spin cycle, I can see what's going on. And in all the one-on-ones and in all the outcomes, we know we're struggling, and to just call it, just name it for what it is, and name it knowing that no one's wrong, that it's not that somebody's a bad apple. It's that there's fear. There's fear and there's fatigue, and we're all working from a point of stress. We're in fight or flight survival mode.
Yeah.
And we want to raise the bar. We want to say, you know what, we're going to start a whole new campaign. This is 2021, and we're going to try a new way, because we want to do great things together. We don't want to be here struggling. There's enough to struggle with out there in the world. Like, let's come together. And I think that leader could say that there's some vision for what's possible, and roll them in exactly what we just said, some higher bar, higher standard, some new way. Everybody's talking about getting back to normal, or what is this new normal? Design it. Say, in my ideal world, go back to like yourself, like my little boy at 14 or even younger, and think about when you were dreaming up what you're going to be when you grow up. What would the ideal be? Just say, we're going to dream it up. I'd have a retreat, and I would have full-on dream session, and say, look, I know we're in the hole. Let's put that aside for a minute and think about what we would like.
Yeah.
Because I think people they forget that it's possible. They give up hope, right? They just say, this is what it is, and I got to quit. That's the only option. I stay or I quit.
Yeah.
Another option to just say, what if as a group, and this could also come from a team member could talk to the other team members and say, am I crazy? Is this kind of not awesome? And if they all are in agreement, talk to their leader and say, I'm working with people all the time to inspire amazing leadership, to manage up, and say, we think that there could be a better way. We want to learn and grow. And having somebody like a coach, to come in who, like, I guide people to do this. I think somebody who to guide you that's outside of it. There's a great book Gordon McKenzie wrote called Orbiting the Giant Hairball.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, I think everybody in culture knows this book. That somebody from a little bit outside the hairball can say, let's draw a line and let's forgive all the ways that we were behaving before, and note that no shame. It was just coming from a whole lot of stress and fear, and we're going to try something new.
Yeah. And let's commit to it together. I think I had a couple of clients pop in the back of my head, Jolene, this is fluffy stuff,
that's the soft skills,
the fluffy stuff. And I love that you gave an example of how this actually impacted a team and an organization, and how this matters. It's not fluffy stuff. We spend 90,000 hours. You mentioned that 90,000 hours at work. This stuff matters. You spend more waking time with people at work than you do with people at home. What? That's crazy.
Oh God, I used to lose my mind, and I might still, if I'm honest, when people call these things soft skills. I know. We're going to look back, like cigarettes were a big thing for a minute. And then now we're like, oh, you can't smoke, it kills you. I think it's going to be the same thing, that we're going to feel so bad that we used to call this stuff soft skills or fluffy, because it is the thing. And I think the only reason it's become diminished like that is patriarchal sort of business world that said that stuff's messy. It's
Yes.
not, it's not predictable. It's not measurable. So it doesn't belong here, you know? But I would say to that person, is love or freedom fluffy? Because that is what you as a person are here to experience in life. And if we can't bring that in to the 90,000 hours, we're up the creek.
Yeah.
We will not ever get there.
Yeah. I think I love that you said that about smoking. It's like it takes a generation or two. So you think about smoking, or you think about even seatbelts and how many years it took for but it's true. I think this is a piece where if we have organizations that pave the way and show us that it's people and business, right? That we can make that turn a lot faster than a generation, or longer. Sometimes seatbelts took longer than a generation, but how we can do this and why it's important. And it's not just for the Googles or those companies out there that people think, well, they're different than I'm a B2B, or we're a different kind of company. We're more conservative than a Google. And I think it's okay. So what's authentic to you then as an organization to focus on the people? And it's not about ping pong tables. It's about what do your people need? What do they care about? What's important to them?
Yeah. Yeah. And we've made it more actionable with these user guides. The user guides just came to me as an idea of, well, we have manuals for all kinds of other things. And we don't have manuals for our marriages or relationships or our kids. But what if we tried? What if we tried to create some kind of a manual to people, and they come in, and beyond the resume, I have a personal brand that is a storyline that includes my essence, so you can know me better and more deeply, more broadly as a human being, but also this user guide that kind of zeroes in on the things. If we were to still play with that machine-like way that we've been, I feel like it's a bridge to this new world that I could see what levers and buttons and pulleys I could use with you to optimize you through this user guide, and that gets people from 0 to 60 pretty quickly.
Was one of them called Beyond the Resume? Because what a great name.
I like, that's what I say all the time. I'm like, life beyond the resume. People,
I'm like, this is fantastic. Yeah. So you and I can talk forever because I just feel I need to, but Karen had talked about this approach, really honoring diversity and inclusion. It's a break from pitying employees and making them compare against each other. And then Rob commented that the common culture is timely. He says he's working with a client leadership team on shifting culture through an important change process. So way to go. And somebody says the fluffy stuff is snuggly. Oh, like teddy bear. That's really awesome. So they are hard skills for sure.
They are. That's the point. They're actually hard. They're not soft because they're hard to do.
They're hard to do. That's why they don't do it. So we have a question here from Jacqueline. So she says, for leaders, is it important to keep some separation between personal and professional, to not let colleagues or leaders into every nook and cranny of a person's personal life? Where's that line to have more of a healthy team, but still have some boundaries?
I love that. I think, yeah, it's going to be different for everybody. It comes down to safety. What would be safe enough for you to share about you and how you work and what you need at work that would have you feel the most self-expressed and the most creative? It's about establishing safety. So you're not going to want to share maybe your whole life, all the things. Unless you're in a safe container to do that, and it would mean something to the way that you can contribute. Like we in the user guides, we talk about speed bumps. And speed bumps are your triggers that probably come from trauma, ways that you were, mistreated, or challenges that you faced in your life, that I believe those wounds, those traumas actually lead us to our purpose. So I was disempowered as a kid, and my whole work is to empower people. I had to hold back to be pleasing, to feel like I'd be enough, so I'd be loved. We can probably all relate to that in some way. And I I got that purpose and that drive because of experiencing that, so much so that I created my business to make sure that nobody ever felt diminished or disempowered. And I think when you know what your triggers are, you know what your wounds are, you're much closer to understanding what your essence is, which is ultimately your greatest career strategy, right? So it's really up to each individual to find that line.
Yeah. Super. I think I love how you phrase that the traumas create that. And people talk about armor and talk about those things. And I think for me, when I think back about what that looks like is growing up, I didn't feel like I really fit anywhere. And now for me it's really about, from a culture standpoint, is what fits for you, right? And helping people find out what fits for them, I think, because people can be anything, and it's anything that fits for them, right? And I think that,
100%.
yeah.
So much that, people can create their own job descriptions. Like I get so broken when I see these people like going out and checking the job boards, like, where might I fit? How
Yeah.
about come up with something that is so unique to you that you go around and tell people that you have this thing, that they create space for you.
Yeah, right. It's about belonging, right? I think you think about Brene Brown and she talks about belonging. That's a pretty big thing. Rob had mentioned employer surveys by groups such as Calgary Economic Development are supporting high interest employees having developed skills related to resiliency, continuous learning, curiosity, and interpersonal. So this is a counterbalance to digital and tech, which is interesting. I know here in Calgary, we're really focused on tech and bringing tech into the city and what that future might look like. And that's really awesome. For those of you that haven't checked out the chat, Anne has posted the power skills. So there's a link to Josh Bernstein. So Bill is asking, can we have the names of the books? Yes, you can have the names of the books. And if you guys have any other questions, I have a few more. So I think, so put your questions into the chat. Oh, well, Morag has one right away. So we might as well ask that so I don't take up all your time. So Morag asks, how do you navigate this with a unionized organization and the perceived constraints around performance and feedback?
Wow, that's a good question. This would be so interesting to go into the union to share the vision, to say unions care about people, right? That they're there to represent the people. And so I feel like there's a big moment of possibility right now to say, hey, there's new data, there's new awareness, and you can look at the Institute for Research on Happiness, Daniel Pink, like there's a lot pointing towards also like humanity and the endeavors for artificial intelligence. There's plenty of research to say, we have some ideas about how we can better support our people. And we want to do this union-wide, to bring in some new ways around. So performance and feedback, I have a lot that I'm working with on this one, because I feel like perf systems are just continuations of school and grading systems that really do not bring out the best in people. Unless maybe they are co-designed, in a way that there's a safe way of delivering feedback that does not have people live in mortal terror. Like we use a very simple feedback formula in my work that does not make people feel like they're failures or scare them, or judge them in a way that you even said, Jolene, you didn't feel like you fit in when you were a kid. I think we all have two primary fears that relate to that I won't be enough and I won't be loved. So I see some of the greatest talent in some of these high-tech companies getting perfs that say, you're not strongly exceeds, you're just exceeds expectations, or consistently meets, which is like an F for these people. They're A+ students that got hired to be in these companies for a reason, and then you're telling them they're not an A+ anymore. What does that do to their morale, to their ability to continue? Now the break in belief in me and the employer-employee relationship is broken, it's compromised. And now I have to do all this work to sort myself and know that I am enough, that I will be loved, that I'm not going to lose my job. I mean, I think we can do better. So I know there needs to be deep communication and feedback in all of these, organizations, but we can do it better in a way that really honors people and creating safety for them to continually grow.
Yeah. Anna says, following along this line of working with unions and performance feedback cycles, all this we are exploring sounds American. How might we bring this to Europe or world? How do we start a revolution in the old world as well?
Oh gosh, I love that. I work with people all over the world, and I hear you that some of this can always sound like very relevant, especially when we go into allyship and the conversation of diversity and inclusion. It's very relevant in America right now. But I have tested a lot of this in Shanghai and in Dublin and around the world with these beautiful souls that still are human beings. So the context will be different, but we are alike in our shared humanity.
Yeah.
And we're all still in this 90,000 hours, situation.
Yeah.
So it's really getting into the shared humanity wherever you are. What are these human beings here to create? What are their wounds and their traumas that would have had them choose this organization, and what is their big hope for what they can contribute? It's getting into the heart and soul of people and understanding how you can support them to do their best work. I think that's universal.
I love that you brought up heart and soul. That was a big thing for me when I kind of started my work is, the head, heart, and soul, right? And understanding that. So I love that connection. Bill has a question. How do you suggest a top-down oriented manager that top-down management is so how do you suggest to a top-down oriented manager that a top-down management approach is not the best type of management and not turn him or her off?
That's a great that's a great question. So I'd use that feedback formula that I mentioned, and in a one-on-one, say there's something I want to share, and bottom line it, like, I have an idea about what would bring out the best on the team. I have this really innovative, like, cool idea that I want to try on with you about what might get us greater results. So you speak to a top-down manager in their language. And then the feedback formula is very simple. And it doesn't come across in a critical way, and it won't cause defensiveness.
Yeah.
Here's what I love, or you could change obviously the word to here's what I appreciate.
Yeah.
And here's what I want more of.
Yeah.
So what I want more of is the entry point to, I've got this great idea. I've got this idea for something that would really bring out high performance, would really create, more well-being, which I think will affect our bottom line. Can we try it? And you make it not about the manager. It's not about that person. They're not wrong, because ultimately they're not. Like, they're managing in a way that they think is safe, that they learned, that they think is the best, and they just need some mirroring.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and remembering that they probably learn the leadership style, right, from that leadership. Anne has a question. Her question is, we're stepping back from our traditional approach to collecting employee feedback to hopefully one that is more frequent, connective, and inclusive. What practices have you seen that complement your work that you're talking about? So collecting employee feedback.
Okay. I think we can do better than surveys. I think that's our genuine, still common way. And, we try to do them a lot and frequently each month. And, not everybody fills them out. And we love getting the data. But I think ultimately it's about taking the time to check in and have the communication structures to do that in a really consistent way. So that's a lot of the work that I do, is creating new languages and new agreements on an ongoing basis around this, around really understanding how we're doing and having those pathways open. So in one-on-ones, there's scripts that we've developed that, how to ask for what you need. I always say the more you want to give, the more you need. So normalizing that and saying, I'm actually trying to create great things, so here's what I need. And having spreadsheets on what are the things that we might give our employees, like 50 ways to appreciate someone, and other languages beyond the basic performance reviews and things that we might give to somebody to bring out the best in them. Also rituals, how you're connecting throughout the week. So how are we tuning in to where people are at before a meeting starts? Checking in on a human level, going around and really creating a safety to say, I'm not doing so hot today, or I'm really low energy, and here's what I need. We have every meeting start with, what do you need out of this meeting?
Yeah.
So there's regular checkpoints, and then language around, I think what's hard for people is to go in and admit that they're not doing well, to admit that maybe they are struggling. And so it was speed bumps in this user guide, like normalizing that everybody has them, and noticing like work styles and management techniques that bring out the best in me. We can just level it for everybody, that it's okay to bring this stuff up.
Yeah. I love speed bumps. I love calling it something that isn't like, I'm challenging or I'm struggling, because that seems like really scary to say those words, but it's like, I've encountered this speed bump, right?
Yeah.
And what that looks like. Danelle is saying the problem is that so many organizations, especially large ones, is that they grade on a curve on salary bands, and the person's eventual rating depends on the boss's pitch in a meeting department and not necessarily their actual performance. So that scale of your high performers now have to fit into these 4 grades, right? Or what, however many ever grades. So what do we do about that?
I think, oh my God, constant feedback. I have high hopes for this young generation that's coming in, that they're not going to put up with this sort of stuff. They're going to say like, why do you guys do it this way? And it'll start to change. But I think talking to your managers about the things that you are performing, all the superpowers that you bring and the skills that are being missed and not recognized. One of the ways that we're augmenting this at other companies, because I feel like it's going to take a while to change these old performance systems that have been in place for so long, and they're such a safety mechanism for management, is to increase the way in which we review performance, to create more vehicles to acknowledge performance. So, and this can come down to like the team culture level of, what do I do as a manager to acknowledge my employees, even if they're getting curved, on the grading scale unfairly? How do I acknowledge that? Tell them I agree, it's unfair, and I'm working to change it with leadership. And in the meantime, what will put gas in your tank? How do you need to be seen and appreciated, so that it doesn't all come down to that? It's hard because sometimes those ratings count, they're connected to salary. And so it can be a really big hit. But I think this conversation, more and more, we educate that these systems are outdated and need to change.
Yeah. I'll never forget, I went into an organization and I had one of my clients come in, and he had grown up in the sports world in a very high level of team play in sports. And he came into an organization and he said, Jolene, I don't understand it. Like, people are kind of operating focused on themselves. And I said, well, what are you seeing from a performance perspective? And it was exactly this, is that people were rated on their individual performance, not team performance, nothing else. And were categorized in a box. And I asked him, I'm like, what kind of environment do you think that's creating? And he's like, holy cow, this is the reason why we're not acting as a team. And I said, your organization has designed this. This is an intentional design of people acting like individuals. Whether they intended to have the outcomes or the consequences that it has is a whole other thing, but it was intentionally created to honor the individual and not honor the team and honor the company, right?
That's so industrial era, right? And then it created every man for himself.
Yeah, like, let's get as much production as we can from you on the manufacturing line by paying you for how many widgets you've made, right?
Right.
That's exactly right. Versus, how do we create the one team? And it's what I call the one team approach of focusing on the the one, and how we can leverage the strengths and the uniqueness that people bring, right? And thinking about it like that.
It's a both and. It's like your and. It's I
It's my
want
aunt.
to definitely recognize the individual, and that's great. But if it's only that, it creates a culture of competition and scarcity and fear. And so if we do a both, where yes, I get recognized and seen for my essence, but I also get super rewarded when I'm being like a good family member, you know, and I'm doing things for the greater good, for the whole, the one. I love that. Then that's what's ultimately what's going to make us succeed. We know that. I mean, at this point in human history, we need to all be working together like never before.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a question so I'm in this space right now. I'm in a virtual world with my team, let's say. What is something that is easy for me? I'm going to use that word intentionally. Something that's easy for me to do tomorrow to start on this journey. Maybe it's more than one thing. But
I mean, yeah, there's a lot. I mean, the easiest would be to call it out, to say, I recognize how hard this is. This is so difficult for all of us to humanize the situation, to get really real. I think teams will be more vulnerable and courageous if their leaders are. So to go there, to be human yourself. And then, I mean, there's some ideas I wanted to say, but I think what ultimately would be easiest would be to say, have every one of those team members write you about what they would like, what would have them feel like connection online is easier, what would have them feel more safe, and say like, I want us to think so far out of the box, so beyond what you think might be possible. You know, crazy. Just tell them to go way out and think about what would make coming to work more exciting. Okay, and let me just inject. This is what I would do. The 6 human needs are
yes.
the foundation of everything that I do with people, because I think the 6 human needs psychology suggests that everything we do in our day is in an attempt to meet these needs. So if you shared the 6 human needs with them and said, think through the lens of these needs, because my needs uncertainty in some ways and contribution. And so I'm thinking right now, as I'm telling you this, through my needs, what would be a great thing for people, but it's going to be different for everybody. So if you gave them the 6 and you said, think of what would you want to meet any one of these needs, if not all of them, then as a manager, you're not struggling to think, what would it be? That's also where we get into trouble, is we assume that we've got all the things that people might need.
Yeah.
And we don't know. And it's different for everybody. So maybe you could come up with all of that input, some shared new rituals, some new way of being together that would really change things.
Can you tell us the 6?
Yes. And can we leave them for them too? Because I have a great handout.
Yes.
I'll tell you right now, but we'll put it on the gift
Yes.
page. Okay. So it's certainty, which is up for everybody right now. The need for safety and predictability and knowing that I'm not going to lose my job, that I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
Uncertainty, which is change and challenge and newness and, you know, no Groundhog Day, no same all the days, like enough that things stay interesting.
Yeah.
Significance, which is big in work, that I know I'm important, that I matter, that I'm needed. Noting that all of these can be met in positive and negative ways. You know, people can go like really controlling or really ego-based to be like the big know-it-all in the room, you know, like, or if we're getting these met at really high levels, then you get the best of someone, you know. So we've got certainty, uncertainty, significance.
Yep.
The 4th one is love and connection, which we know is really big at work. The 5th is growth, that we need to always feel like everything that happens, even if we get one of those poor performance ratings, is growth. Even every difficult person on our team, every person who disagrees with us is our greatest teacher. And then the last one's contribution, the ability to really feel like we are making a difference. And that goes at that every man for himself thing, that if we can feel like we're contributing together, people are so tired and they don't ask for help. So how can we lean on each other to contribute together in a way that it does not feel like the entire world is on our shoulders?
Huge,
Yeah.
huge. So we're going to get that for you. I'm going to pop up Cherie's speaker page here. So right now we have the 7 days. That 7-day kind of challenge that you have is on there right now, but I'll make sure we get this guide. One of the things that you mentioned is you alluded to these user guides.
Yes.
How might people get these magical user guides that you keep talking about?
I'm so happy to share them. There's a template that I can share, and the magic and how you go about filling them out and activating them happens in retreat with me, and that I like go down this, in this process of helping every person discover their essence, and then helping them all really identify the answers to all of these different aspects of the user guide. So when you see it, it might not feel like you know what to do with it, but you can reach out to me and I'll help you activate it.
So on that speaker page in the chat, I have Cherie's contact information there. So it's there, it exists, it's part of that. The other thing is I'm going to give you guys homework as I've been doing. So if you post in the LinkedIn group, you get an entry for a beautiful gift basket, quote unquote basket. So I popped the LinkedIn link in there. So I want you to answer in the LinkedIn group for me. What is something today that you are going to take away to create more well-being for you? So I've been asking them about their teams and their culture and their company, but today, what is the one thing that you've taken away from today that's going to create more well-being for you?
People are well, do well. I have to say that a lot of people think that I can't do well and also be well because I have to throw that in the back burner. Not true.
Yes. So what from today will help you do well and be well? We'll change the question. I'll put that in the group as well as send you out an email today. Cherie, I want to talk with you all day long. Like, I feel like set up a call with you and like, I'm just so excited and fired up. I'm like, oh, I got to talk with Cherie more. I got to talk with her more. This has been so great. We've had comments in the chat coming out that have been like a great presentation. It's been very uplifting. I appreciate this much. What does this look like? For the question about how do we think about this across cultures and styles, we've got 2 people talking about that coming up about styles and cultures. But I really want to thank you for today in joining us and helping us on this journey and learning about this. This is such a different way for us to think about approach to work and well-being and belonging. And thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was a total pleasure. So much joy on this great group of humans. Thank you all for doing what you do out in the world. I'm hopeful that it's going to be a much better place for our children.
I'm going to ask you guys to unmute and give Cherie